The Baltimore Ravens clearly won the 2025 NFL Draft with a sensational rookie class. We recap all 3 days of the draft, continue diving into grades, as well as looking at the initial response from media, former players, a lot more, and asking ourselves, do the Ravens really have any weaknesses left? All that and more coming up on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here today, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. We're free and available for you on all podcasting platforms, including in video form on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to the channel, and in audio form where you can follow along and subscribe as well. We're a 5-day-a-week Ravens podcast over here on Locked On Ravens, so we bring you the news, analysis, updates that you need to keep up to date on this Ravens team. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by Nissan and the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay tuned for the Armada draft pick of the week later in the show. Shout out to all the everydayers, shout out to all the new listeners, and also shout out to those who are in the middle. We've built up such a great community over here on Locked On Ravens, and we had such an incredible draft weekend. We had 3 post-day live streams. We reacted to every single pick. We had bonus episodes, and again, incredible support from everybody, both in the video and audio community, on social media, subtext. I can't thank everybody enough. It was a blast. We go through months and months of player scouting, mock drafts, and then in a span of 3 days, it's over. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about the Ravens, in my opinion, clearly winning the 2025 drafts. I thought they did a really, really good job. We'll talk about some of the initial media responses to Baltimore's draft, including Malaki Starks, Mike Green, and a lot more. We'll go over the class, dive into a little bit more of some grades. We did a full grading episode on yesterday's bonus episode. And then we'll ask ourselves, do the Ravens actually have any weaknesses left, or is this mainly the team they're going to run with for the 2025 season? Let's dive into it here. Ravens draft class, they used up all 11 picks. Now, they made a couple of trades along the way, but they started off with 11 picks and they ended with 11 picks. Let's just do a quick recap. 1 through 11 of those draft picks. Number 27, they took Malaki Starks, safety from Georgia. 59, Mike Green, the edge from Marshall. 91, Emory Jones Jr., offensive lineman from LSU. 129, Teddy Buchanan, linebacker from California. 141, Carson Vinson, an offensive lineman from Alabama A&M. Bilal Kone, the corner from Western Michigan at 178. Tyler Loop, kicker from Arizona at 186. LeJontay Wester, wide receiver from Colorado at 203. Then at 210, Anise Peebles, the defensive lineman from Virginia Tech. Robert Longerbeam at 212, corner from Rutgers. And finally, 243, guard Garrett Dellinger out of LSU. Look, it's a very solid haul, in my opinion. Baltimore, they went best player available. They addressed needs, and they got value. Okay, this was a value draft. Now, not every single pick was that, right? Not every single pick was perfect, but I also factor in round valuation and how I do things. If you listened or watched our bonus episode where I did grade each and every single pick, I tried to separate as best as I could individual player pick, like who that person is as a player, what their scouting report looks like, and then the overall Ravens team grade. I thought a lot of picks Baltimore had, that the individual player, you got A's, A pluses, B pluses, like really solid profiles. The way the Ravens got there were a lot of good moves. There were a couple of bad moves, and we'll talk about that a little bit more today. But I think the first thing that I want to get into when it comes to this class is the fact, and I've been shouting this from the rooftops forever. We've talked about it with former Ravens, with analysts. The Ravens needed instant impact, right? I think that was one of the biggest things that I was looking at when it came to what would classify or what would make this a successful draft for the Ravens, right? Projects are great. High upside is great. You can swing on that if you want to, and Eric Costa certainly does every season, sometimes earlier than later, or sometimes he just does it later. But the Ravens, much like we saw last year, the impact they got from Nate Wiggins and Roger Rosengarten as rookies was a big reason why Baltimore was so successful last season. And this year, I think they're going to get that production from their first two picks again, Malaki Starks and Mike Green. Malaki Starks is someone that can slot in immediately. We've talked about him for the past handful of days here. We talked about him early on in the draft process when we were doing our mock drafts on Locked On Ravens. I actually think Malaki Starks was the first Ravens mock draft I had, and then I think Mike Green was my second. Maybe I'm not remembering it right, but I know those two, we talked about them very early on in the process as potential first-round picks. Baltimore gets Malaki at 27 and Mike Green at 59. And both those guys free up opportunities for other players. Again, the big thing with Malaki Starks is him being able to, again, if the reports are true that Baltimore wants to keep him in his deep role, it'll be interesting to see how the Ravens deploy Malaki Starks or even Darius Washington if they sign another big safety to play that Swiss Army knife role. But if they want to put Kyle Hamilton back and give him that freedom, which is what I personally think they should do, have him play all over the field, Malaki Starks can play the deep half of the field for you. He's a very smart football player, very smart person. He knows what he's doing. He has a plan, the ball awareness, the ball skills. And to me, the fact that he can also come up and play the run is really important too. He will miss some tackles. He could stand maybe add a bit more to his frame, but still, the big thing with him is he's going to be able to come in with Kyle Hamilton and make a pretty dynamic duo. And then Mike Green comes in as a star, in my opinion. He's pro ready. He's ready to make an impact day one. And I said this, and this might be a bit of a bold prediction, and we'll have a bold prediction episode, a couple months from now. We'll probably do one before the season starts. But I think Mike Green has the potential by the time week one is over to become Baltimore's best pass rusher on the roster already. That's not a shot at enough at Owe. It's not a shot at Kyle Van Noy. I just think that's how good Mike Green is. I'm not trying to take away anything from anybody else on the Ravens roster, but Mike Green is so NFL ready. Again, 17 sacks at Marshall in his final year. Beat up on teams like Ohio State. So, the small school accusations to me don't really, they don't add up. Mike Green did play against some good schools and he dominated that tape. You can watch the Ohio State game where the viral clip is his devastating spin move, which again, he plays the run aggressively. He's a high motor guy. On the field, he fits exactly what the Ravens are, which is 110% on every play. He's physical, speed to power guy. If he adds more strength, even just a little more strength, he's going to be even more devastating than he already is. He has a pass rushing plan. He knows how to use his moves and execute his moves to the best of his ability. There's just so much to like about Mike Green, not just the fact that he is such a dominant pass rusher, but also in the run game, he is a pure 3-down ready player day one in the NFL. And that's exactly what this Ravens pass rushing group needed. And on top of that, yes, every pick wasn't a home run like a Malaki Starks or a Mike Green, but I thought that they had solid options like Emory Jones. I liked the pick. He was on my short list of guys I would have been perfectly fine with them taking at 91. Would have preferred to trade up for Wyatt Milum. I understand that, he might not have fit Baltimore's system as clean as other guys, but I still feel like that could have been a day one impact starter. I think Emory Jones, he has the potential to be a starter. I'm not taking him out of that equation, but he's someone that I think might need a year or two, and maybe they see him more as a swing tackle. They kind of hinted at his role year one, so we'll see. Then you talk about Teddy Buchanan and some of those day three picks where I actually like the Teddy Buchanan pick. Again, I don't really care as much about positional value. If a guy can play, a guy can play. And Baltimore did need inside linebackers, right? You had 3 on the roster before this draft started with Roquan, Trenton Simpson, and Jake Hummel. Buchanan can come in, be a special teams contributor. He can cover guys. He's uber athletic. I liked that. The trade back to 141, and it's not against Carson Vincent. I tried to make that clear on yesterday's bonus episode. It's not against Carson Vincent. It's why I tried to separate player grade from team grade. I thought the trade back, they got too cute. I thought they got too cute at the end of day 2, and I thought they got too cute in the middle of day 3. And that's just my honest opinion about it. They moved back 5 spots in the 4th round to move up 5 spots, in the 6th round. So you end up going 5 spots back in a more valuable round and only move up 5 spots in a less valuable round. In order to make that trade worth it for you, you would have had to move up more spots in the less valuable round. And Baltimore, even if you didn't like the Teddy Buchanan pick, they still had opportunities to take defensive linemen that were really good, that were day 2 guys, in my opinion, at 136. That they could have taken at 129, but they fell to 136. Joshua Farmer out of Florida State and Cam Jackson out of Florida. Maybe Baltimore thought one or both would fall to them and trading back 5 picks wasn't a big deal. Well, the Patriots nabbed Joshua Farmer away, and then Carolina at 140, 1 pick before Baltimore, took Cam Jackson. And then Baltimore ended up taking another offensive lineman in the 7th round. So I didn't like that process personally. I thought that they could have gotten a really solid player. Not that Vincent isn't a good player and that he has potential. Like, again, he's not going to start for you year one. He's going to be a developmental player. But I thought they could have handled that a little bit differently. Outside of that, though, I mean, Baltimore still, I thought, had one of the best, I mean, definitely the best draft in this class, if we're honestly thinking about it. I thought the Patriots had a really solid class. I thought the Steelers did a decent job as well. There were teams that did a good job. I'm not saying that the Ravens, they're the only team that did well. No, I mean, I thought the Falcons, they traded a future one away. I don't think the trade itself was great for Atlanta to get James Pierce, but, they doubled down on edge, doubled down on safety. I thought that the Cowboys had a really nice draft. I loved their pick of Tyler Booker, Savon Revel, and, even a Donovan Izaraku. Like, that's a really solid draft. The Jaguars getting Travis Hunter was awesome. I thought Mike McDonald in Seattle had a really nice class as well. There are a couple of others also. But I thought that Baltimore got like Baltimore checked every box, in my opinion. And that's something I mentioned at the beginning of the show. Best player available strategy. Boom. Addressed needs. Boom. Value across the board for the most part. Boom. Again, I'm not trying to tell you every pick was an A+. And if you want to go back and listen, if you haven't already, to my grades, I laid out kind of where I went with my class and with my grades for the class. But I still think that overall, especially with me weighing the picks of Malaki Starks and Mike Green a little heavier than I would a Garrett Dellinger in the 7th round, this class, and this is my prediction, it's going to make or break on Mike Green. It is what it is, right? I think that the Ravens lucked into a bit of value, and maybe, look, for Mike Green, maybe he just was off so many teams' boards that, everybody had the perception of, with the off-field stuff, he'll go, even though that's a thing. He'll go in the 1st round, top 15, top 20. Maybe, the media and everybody we didn't account for the slide that he was going to have. Right? Maybe that just is what it is. And his real range was in the middle to late 2nd round. And really not a lot of people caught wind of that. So I don't know. Aeneas Peebles definitely saved them a little bit. I would have been a lot harsher if they weren't able to get Aeneas Peebles, because you lost out on plenty. This was an all-time defensive line class, and Baltimore almost got nobody on the interior. So very glad they got Aeneas Peebles, who we'll get into a little bit in the second part of the show. And coming up in the second part of the show, we'll dive into initial media, former player reactions to Baltimore's class, some of their top picks as well, because a lot of people have a lot of nice things to say about what Baltimore did on the 3 days of the draft. So be sure to stay tuned. A lot to get to on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by Gametime. There's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. It's electric in the arena, and with Gametime, you can be part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Gametime makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when demand is sky high. Prices on the app actually go down as tip-off gets closer, and their last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. And here's why I use Gametime. They have last-minute deals where you can save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And the all-in pricing they have means no surprise fees at checkout. What you see is what you pay. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Again, terms apply. Create an account, redeem code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Back here on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher here with you on this Monday after draft weekend. Again, can't express how much gratitude and appreciation I have for everybody who tuned in this weekend, video watchers, audio listeners, social media. We're doing a lot over there. Twitter at ChaosStriker34, Instagram at ChaosStriker34, subtext as well. I'm so grateful for this community. And just a little spoiler alert, I'll say it on Friday and we'll celebrate it then. But Friday will be my 1,500th episode of Locked On Ravens, dating back to 2019. I've never missed a weekday episode of the show in nearly 6 years. And I wouldn't have it any other way. I love doing this. I love covering this team. I love, all of the happy moments we have in celebrating those. And I also love hopefully being a place where people can vent and, talk through and hopefully me be a therapeutic listen to people to kind of get through those tough times in Baltimore Ravens football. So I appreciate it. We'll again celebrate a little more with that on Friday, but I just wanted to get that out there because I can't express my gratitude for this community here. And it's, just it's reflection after a big weekend, right? Draft weekend, it's a grind. For me, I didn't really sleep a lot. You're on camera for a lot of stuff. And I know that, I wasn't live here on Locked On Ravens. I was running around. I was doing stuff for the network, which was an awesome opportunity. I was hopping on live streams, different people's live streams. And look, the draft is busy, but I love it. And it's such an amazing grind that we go through with the draft every single season. Now, rounding out the rest of Baltimore's class, we got to Carson Vincent, and then we took a break for the first segment. But Bilal Kone is an interesting player to me. He's someone that I think has a lot of the tools to be successful at the NFL level. People see him more as an outside guy at the NFL level, which I like. I like that the Ravens double dipped at corner here. And Kone's a guy that might not be, the most well-known prospect, but I think with his intangibles and his tools, he's someone that could make an impact. He's very fluid in his movements, which I feel like is a really solid aspect for a cornerback, at least what Baltimore's looking for. And he's not going to be asked to play right away. But Ozzie Newsome's favorite saying, you can never have too many corners, and the Ravens ringing by that saying here on the 2025 draft. Now, I think an interesting pick, and everybody was kind of wondering, if you've been listening to me on the show, I was pounding the bell that, hey, the Ravens are going to do this. They're going to do this. They took a kicker, Tyler Loop, out of Arizona. It was a 6th-round pick. Loop 6 for 9 on 50-plus yard field goals this past season, a career long of 62 that happened. There's a viral video, and I put it out on social media of him hitting a 65 and 70-yarder during just training. So he has an NFL-ready leg. Obviously, this calls the future of Justin Tucker into even more question. Baltimore, this is the first kicker they have ever drafted in team history. So that is a pretty significant thing. And, Eric DeCosta was asked, John Harbaugh was asked about what Justin Tucker's future could be now that Tyler Loop is on the roster. And John Harbaugh said that Justin Tucker was actually in the building this past week working out. And the team had conversations with him about the possibility that the Ravens would draft a kicker. And for Eric DeCosta, he made it clear about Justin Tucker that, look, they wanted to take good football players. And for Tucker, at the end of the day, he said right now they're both on the roster, and talked about Luke being really talented. He hasn't really thought about how it impacts Tucker's roster spot at this point. I feel like he maybe has thought about it a little bit, but that's a decision they're going to have to make. And what I've kind of been saying about this kicker situation with Justin Tucker is, again, like the NFL still doing their investigation. The Ravens have made it clear they are, letting the NFL do their thing and staying out of it. We'll see what their ultimate decision is. But, if the Ravens don't decide to do anything with the off-field allegations, which again, we don't know what they're going to do, but let's just say they don't, it's very possible that Tyler Loop gets cut. It just is. Now, I think there's more of a likely chance that this is a kicker competition. That's new in the Justin Tucker era, where he's been so solid over the course of his career that every kicker that gets brought in for training camp is like, oh, it's just a camp body. That guy will give Tucker some rest in the preseason, save his leg. This truly feels like it could be the beginning of the end for Justin Tucker. And again, we have to solve a couple of things there. One is the question of what Baltimore is going to do with the off-field allegations. And the other is Justin Tucker still reliable? Because as we know, was not a great year for him last season. Was able to get it together towards the end, but actively cost them multiple games last year. Let's keep going, though. LeJohntay Wester, I think a really solid player for Baltimore. You look at the size. I know it's not what people wanted. I thought Baltimore could have gone in two directions, and if you listen to the show, I kind of outlined these. I would have loved Baltimore to get a big body wide receiver. I think Nick Nash in the later rounds would have been really nice. Savion Williams in the mid rounds. Jack Besh went a little earlier than I thought he would to Las Vegas, but still, it's like that big body prototype I thought was kind of the missing piece. The other situation I kind of looked at for Baltimore was, well, if they want to go returner, right? Deontay Hardy didn't work out for them last season. He was a guy that filled that last wide receiver spot. Now, LeJontay Wester, I think that is what Baltimore envisions with him. First of all, he's an exceptional route runner. I don't want to only pass off LeJontay as he's just a returner. He can't do anything else. That's not what I'm saying at all. He has shiftiness, speed, but I think those things that make him such a tough cover in the slot make him really exciting as a return prospect. And again, you want to look at some of LeJontay's stats here. His best season came in 2023 at Florida Atlantic before moving over to Colorado for 2024. 108 receptions in 2023, 1,168 yards and 8 touchdowns for LeJontay Wester. But as a returner, 278 yards and 1 touchdown in 2023 on 14 returns, which ends up being, that 19.9 per return. And then in 2024, Colorado, 9 returns, 108 yards and a score. That's 12 yards per return. So I think that is where they're going with LeJontay Wester, and I like that for them. Aeneas Peebles is one of the best pure pass rushers on the interior in this draft. He's a little undersized. He's not going to give you the world in terms of stopping the run and taking on double teams and whatnot, but he is a pure pass rusher on the interior, disruptive, motor, high-intensity guy. I loved that pick for them, right? I thought that was awesome. And again, was the last draftable defensive lineman, at least that I thought was worthy of being drafted by Baltimore in the later rounds there. So really glad they got him. Then a couple of picks to round it out for Baltimore. I thought that, you look back at it here, Robert Longerbeam at 212, really solid corner. I think a lot of people view him in the slot at the NFL level, which is totally fine. Again, you have positional versatility. Longerbeam fell a little further than I thought he was going to. I thought he was going to be mid to late 5th round pick. He obviously goes to Baltimore at 212. I thought it was solid value. And again, double dipping on corner. And then Grant Dellinger, someone that can really just be a depth piece. But then when you kind of look at the question of what actually is a depth piece, or what does that look like for the Ravens, I don't know if 11 players actually make this roster. I don't. So we'll see. Baltimore's draft class overall, though, really solid. I gave it, and actually, I won't spoil my grade, my full grade. If you want to go back and listen to my grade show, go ahead. I highly recommend you do that. But I thought Baltimore was the clear winner of the draft. I think they ran laps around the NFL. They took opportunities. Was not perfect, but I still think that overall Baltimore did one heck of a job. And coming up, we will dive into the media reactions. I know I went a little longer than I thought on the actual breakdown, so we'll get into media reactions in the final part of the show. We'll also dive into the question of, do the Ravens actually have any weaknesses after the 2025 draft is now concluded? So be sure to stay tuned. A lot coming your way, including a UDFA update on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by Nissan. The Armada pick of the week is brought to you by our friends at Nissan and the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. This week, we're highlighting the top pick from our draft, the one selection that truly stood out, the guy who showcased the strength and power to push the Ravens forward as we look ahead to next season. This week's Armada and clear-cut top pick of the draft is Malaki Starks. Now, we know why Malaki Starks was drafted. It was because the Ravens needed a safety. He is an all-around player. He is a rugged guy that conquers on the field. And I know a lot of people were maybe thinking about Malaki Starks, dreaming about Malaki Starks coming to the Ravens. Well, if you dream big, you go big. And that's what Malaki Starks is going to bring to the table in Baltimore. When it comes to the Nissan Armada, they say go forth and conquer. And that's exactly what I think Malaki Starks can do here. It's clear that our top pick of the draft is out here, ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can in the all-new Nissan Armada or any of their outstanding vehicles. Take Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. Back here on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still talking with you here on this Monday after draft weekend. Appreciate everybody for being here today, making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day and a part of your day in general. Again, awesome draft weekend for the show here. Can't really tell everybody how much I appreciate them for all of the support. So if you listened at any point during draft weekend, really appreciate you. If you didn't, hey, you know what? I really appreciate you being here and a part of the show as we move along here. We're still going to have 5 days a week of Ravens content. We never miss a weekday here on Locked On Ravens. And let's dive into now some of the media perception of Baltimore's draft, at least initially. And I'm sure we'll have more to talk about tomorrow and over the course of the week, especially as we get more into overall reactions from people probably today, tomorrow, but we'll keep an eye on it. I mean, you have a bunch of guys who say the Ravens had an A-plus draft, crushed the draft. Mike Renner over at CBS Sports, Kirk Benkert, who was a former quarterback at the NFL level. You also have Mike Renner talking about DeCosta in a little more detail over on CBS Sports, saying this is an A-plus draft, one of the few I gave out. First round, second round, you could not have gone any better for this Baltimore Ravens team. You also look a little bit more across the league, and not only just to guys like Malaki Starks and Mike Green, but, Vinny Iyer of Sporting News, and as a part of the Locked On Podcast Network family, he gave the Ravens an A, saying the Ravens should be the prime example of letting the draft come to them. You have Chad Reuter of NFL.com. He gave them an A, saying the Ravens are perennial contenders because they let the draft board come to them. You sensing a little theme here? This is what the Ravens do. I said, if you listen to our show after the first round, they won it without lifting a finger because Malaki Starks fell directly into their lap. Mike Green, you can talk about it there too, fell directly into their lap. Malik Kiper gave him a B+, ended up talking about a lot of their picks, including Starks and Green, but also made sure to mention Emory Jones, Robert Longerbeam, and Aeneas Peebles, and even Bilal Kone there, Tyler Loop. He called him his number one kicker this year. I know other people had Fitzpatrick and a couple other guys. Some people didn't even have Tyler Loop on their board, but Mel Kiper very high on Baltimore's draft. Chris Trapasso had Baltimore at a B+ of CBS Sports. Dan Wilkins had a B+ over on The Score. And again, like you have a lot of other guys who are all in on what Baltimore was able to do during the draft. And that to me shows a lot because there were a lot of good teams that had good drafts. I thought the Chiefs did really well. Also, I was actually kind of impressed with Kansas City, which I don't like to say, but unfortunately, that just kind of is what it is, right? And Baltimore was able to take advantage of a lot of their opportunities and really put together a solid 3 days overall. Again, was it perfect? No. And you know what? If you've listened to the show here today and you're still here with us, I'll tell you my draft grade if you haven't listened. If you have, this isn't big news to you, but I gave them right around a B+ to A-, and I think I've settled on an A-. I think that's where I went. Again, wasn't a fan of some of the maneuvers Baltimore made, wasn't a fan of them keeping 11 picks, thought they should have traded up at points. And, I didn't necessarily not like any of the prospects they took. Like, there wasn't a pick where I was like, oh, like this guy, come on. Like, I actually liked all of Baltimore's picks. Now, I liked some more than others, but I'm going to weigh Starks and Green over guys like, 6th or 7th rounders that they had. That's just, it is what it is. So the class is going to be make or break, and that's going to fall on Mike Green's shoulders, but we are going to see what that looks like for him, and hopefully he's able to live up to expectations. Undrafted free agency update for Baltimore. They signed a couple of really solid inside linebackers, Chandler Martin and Jay Higgins. Martin coming from Memphis and Jay Higgins coming from Iowa. Two guys who, in my opinion, really solid players. Now, Higgins is someone I had on my radar for them in the later rounds. I had mocked him in a couple of drafts if you've been listening to me on the show. And Chandler Martin is someone that I thought was going to be a later round pick, and he did not go either. You also have guys like Jared Penning out of Northern Iowa, who actually is the brother of Trevor Penning, first-round pick of the Saints. If you remember, he actually was mocked to Baltimore in a lot of mock drafts that year. Jacob Dobbs out of James Madison, Nick Jackson, linebacker out of Iowa. So they're signing a lot of linebackers here. John Hoyland out of Wyoming, a kicker. You also have Thomas Perry, offensive lineman, Reed Holsky, offensive lineman, Xavier Gilroy, wide receiver from Arizona State. Wide receiver state. Try to combine the two right there. You also got Marcus Major Jr., Minnesota running back, who I think is really intriguing. Keandre Jackson, defensive back from Illinois State. You have Jared Christian Lichtenhan from Oregon State, the offensive lineman. Sam Pitts, the Minnesota Duluth tight end. I also feel like Jason Jones out of Auburn, the defensive lineman, is someone who could potentially make this roster, and that actually kind of segues us in. Does Baltimore have any real weaknesses left? I would say they need one more defensive lineman. definitely more of a run stuffer to replace Michael Pierce. I don't know where that comes from. Maybe it is Brent Urban coming back. Maybe it is an undrafted player making a name for himself. There aren't really a ton of quality D-line options available left, but maybe Baltimore goes to that market. Other than that, though, I really don't think so. I mean, I guess the guard position, depending on how Daniel Falele and Andrew Voorhees play, that certainly could be either a big strength or a big weakness. It really could go either way. I personally am pretty nervous if Falele and Voorhees start for you week one. I think Voorhees is more of a wild card, but Falele is a wild card too. Falele improved over the course of the season, but also had a lot of loud bad moments throughout the year, right? And Voorhees we saw a little bit of, but not a ton. But you go down the list: quarterback, no weakness; running back, no weakness; fullback, no weakness; wide receiver, no weakness. Maybe you would have wanted a bigger bodied receiver. I get it, but still, I'm not going to say a weakness there. Tight end, no weakness; tackle, no weakness; center, no weakness; defensive line, I mentioned one more defensive lineman; edge with Mike Green, no weakness; inside linebacker, you could make, maybe you could call inside linebacker one if you're not sold on Teddy Buchanan or Trenton Simpson. Certainly seems like the Ravens aren't sold on Trenton Simpson right now, so maybe that is what the conversation is. Other than that, though, corner, I think there's no weakness. Safety, I think there's no weakness. I guess maybe kicker, obviously with the Tucker situation and Tyler Luke being unproven, I could see you saying kicker is a weakness. Punter, maybe punter too. Jordan Stout has not been amazing. I think that there were high expectations considering he was a 4th-round pick replacing an all-time punter in Sam Cook. It's been a little disappointing for Jordan Stout. I'm not saying he's been awful. I think that'd be unfair, but I think he was expected to be like amazing, incredible, and that just hasn't been what he's been, right? I think we can keep it honest about that. Returner, I guess you can call it. I guess special teams is just a weakness right now. Long snapper is not a weakness. Nick Moore is one of the best in the league, but I mean, outside of long snapper, even at returner, LeJonte Wester is kind of an unknown right now. So I guess every special teams spot outside of long snapper could be a weakness. All right, maybe a couple more than I thought, but still, overall, Baltimore's roster, very, very strong. Again, Baltimore, in my opinion, clearly wins the 2025 draft. A lot of teams had good drafts. I'm not just saying it was Baltimore and that's it, but I think that they are clear winners in the 2025 draft, and it speaks to a lot of the picks that they made, the values that they got, and hopefully these guys can make immediate impacts for Baltimore. But that's all I have for you today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. On the way out, hit the like and subscribe button in video form and follow along in audio form for 5 days a week of daily Ravens coverage. Coming up tomorrow, we'll continue to analyze this 2025 draft class, get into the latest storylines. I think there might be some juicy ones coming up tomorrow. I just have a feeling, especially the day after or the first weekday after the draft. So be sure to stay tuned. I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.